You are now tuned into the Dads Who Lift podcast, episode 2. Today we're talking to local real estate legend, if I do say so myself, Rusty Johnson. He's going to be telling us basically everything there is to know about getting into the real estate investing market, the benefits of investing. Is this something just anybody can do? What qualifications you need? And really, he's going to touch on a lot of subjects. Rusty, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. First up, thanks for having me, Joel. This is my first podcast, so I will do my best to keep the babbling to a minimum. Anytime you're talking about your own business, I know it's easy to do. But yeah, Rusty Johnson, I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska, born and raised. A little bit about my history. Went to UNL, got a bachelor's degree. I was on top of the world, moved to Phoenix in 2005 and bought my first house. Well, that was when, for those who can remember, the market was kind of approaching a bubble. I bought a house for $215,000 and ended up doing a short sale 5 years later for $83,000. So wasn't great. I didn't know what I was doing at the time. I bounced around from job to job. I was broke. I was partying. I just kind of doing anything and everything, but I didn't really have any direction. And so I came back to Omaha in 2011 with the intention of being a realtor, and been doing that ever since. And I would say if anybody who has not seen the movie The Big Short, have you seen that movie, Joel?
No.
The Big Short is a really it's a great movie. It focuses on what that market crash did, like how all the banks and the corruption that we had. It's pretty funny too. It's got Christian Bale, Steve Carell, Ryan Gosling, wink, wink, looking at you right there. But anyway, it's a great movie. It's funny, it's interesting, and it kind of shows you how we got into such a bind back then and why our markets went down. And I was one of those victims too. I've recovered. The second purchase and those after have been much better, but that's a little bit of history about who I am.
Wow. So how'd you get into real estate?
So the first house I bought down there, I didn't know what I was doing. I had good credit. I had a little bit of money saved up, and that was about it. So the realtor I had in Phoenix was just kind of showing me houses and trying to push me into a house, and not to throw him under the bus, but ultimately he didn't really ask any questions on my behalf, So I ended up buying a townhome in an area that I didn't like. It didn't have a big backyard, really didn't have anything that I wanted. So, and then at the same time, I was going broke because I was partying too much. And I ended up started playing around with renovations and YouTubing stuff, and realized that I actually liked working on homes. And so from there, not that I was a full-blown carpenter by any means, but I just started understanding how homes worked. And so when I came back to Omaha in 2011, I hit it full speed, hit the ground running. And so that's kind of the history. So at this point in time, with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, I've got my own team, the Insight Group. And I've been, bought and sold over 300 homes. And each year I've tried to put something under my belt new. In the real estate world, you don't necessarily get new credentials and that people are aware of. So, condos, for instance, learning those, new construction, how to build, and the right questions to ask. And about 3 or 4 years ago, I started paying a lot more attention to the investing world, which is kind of what we're going to discuss today.
So how many properties over the years have you invested in that you still handle right now to this day?
So how I got started with it, and I think this is an important thing for people to understand. So right now I got my primary residence, then I've got a couple handfuls of properties, of investment properties. The reason I never like to say numbers, because sometimes if it's, people think it's too high, they think like, oh my goodness, I'm never going to be able to achieve that. Or if they think it's too low, it's like, well, does that guy really know what he's talking about? So it's in between 5 and 10, the numbers of rental properties that I have. And I've helped a lot of people get started, buying their first, buying their second. But how I got started is we bought an older home, renovated it, and we were able to pull a lot of equity from it. So the real simple numbers, let's say you buy a $150,000 home, you put $50,000 into it, but now it's worth $300,000. Well, you can essentially, depending on the bank, you can pull up to $80,000 or $100,000 out of that and use that money now to invest where you're going with real estate in the investment world. You can use it for anything, really. You can use it for a wedding. It's called a HELOC. But now you've got equity, you've got extra money to work with for investment purposes.
Wow. So how do you manage all those properties? And yet you're obviously a dad who lifts, is why you're on the podcast. But how do you help people invest, find people homes, manage your own rental properties, and then also manage your family at home.
Sounds like a lot, doesn't it? Well, as I would say kind of you take it one piece at a time. So first and foremost, having your own business, as you know, you've recently started, 100% being your own person in the personal training world. And I think, the key there is getting on the same page with your family. First and foremost, you need your friends and your family support. And you need to be on the same page with what your time is going to be dedicated to. Anytime you start a new business, you're probably going to be putting in anywhere from 60 to 80 hours a week, and you become your own ambassador. You need to have your phone on you at all times. You need to check your email at all times. So I would say having that goal of getting your family support first is definitely ideal. From there, it is about having separate time for the family as well, because you can work, but if you're not, at the end of the day, what are we working for? What are we investing for? And ultimately, it's to have a great life with our family. As far as the juggling goes, we can talk a little bit more about that later. As far as the kind of the pros and cons of rental properties and investment properties. For the purposes, I would say, let me say one thing else for today. The two types of investment properties, I think, with single family homes, there's like the flipping aspect and then the rental aspect, the buy and hold and renting it out. And so for today, I think with the time that we have, we're going to focus on like the single family rentals. We're not going to get into the multifamilies, the commercial stuff, just the kind of single family rentals, because that's what, a great market here in Omaha is right now. But yeah, you know how it is. You've got a new baby, you run your own business. You just have to make time for everybody and everything, and you just figure it out. As far as the rental goes, I'll quick touch on that. We can elaborate later. If you just do it right, just invest correctly, get the house ready to go. I probably talk to my tenants, 2 or 3 times a year, because if something breaks down, they've got the person to reach out to. They contact me. I'm not a slumlord. I do the business the right way, and that makes it much more efficient, much easier.
So before I get into like what all the benefits are of somebody investing in real estate, the number one thing people are going to probably think when they see this podcast or they're listening to it is, oh, this isn't for me. I'm a regular guy. I make $40,000-$50,000 a year. I got a family at home. This is for your big wigs who have the spare income to invest in real estate. How true is that? And what qualifications would somebody need if they wanted to invest in their first property?
Yep. And I get that question a lot, and I get it more and more because, 10, 15 years ago, there was still plenty of investors, but it wasn't broadcasted like it is now. We have so many TV shows now. There's so many podcasts. Bigger Pockets is a fantastic podcast for anyone to listen to if they currently don't. So for your average person, the first thing you have to ask yourself is why are we doing this? What is our goal? And I think that's what you have to do with like almost anything in life, especially when you're talking about investments. So, there are really 3 things that you need when it comes to investing in real estate. You need credit. You need to have some sort of good credit. You do need to have access to some sort of cash. And you also need a lot of courage. And I would say courage is the one thing that people definitely lack the most when they start talking about this. But sure, a person that's making your $40,000 or $50,000 a year, I'm not going to lie, money does have to come from somewhere. But I've got clients who do Uber driving. I've got clients that have side jobs. I've got clients that partner with a family member and say, hey, let's go in on this. Or I've got a lot of clients. What I work with people to buy a house. I'm not just an investment realtor. I help people do anything and everything, as you know. And a big process is, maybe we do buy that house and put some money into it and then pull some equity from it. I mean, so the short answer is yes, it is realistic for anyone to do. But everyone is specific, no different than, financial planning with someone. What I might recommend for you, having one young child at your age might be different than what I'm recommending for someone who's, worth $500,000 plus, or worth millions of dollars, and is 50 or 60 years old. It really is specific and kind of like personal training,
So how can you tell if the city that you're in right now is a good spot to invest in? Like, for example, we're both in Omaha, Nebraska. How would I know if Omaha is a good place to invest in? And if it's not, is it possible to invest in a property outside of your city?
Yeah, so for me personally, I mean, there's a way to, I mean, the internet has so many things that I probably don't even know about. So, I mean, you can be like a ghost investor, all over the nation, all over the world. To me, that's, again, I don't know that market well enough. What I do know is the Omaha market. And I do know that I've got a lot of clients that are out of state because they can't get the same returns of what we get back here in Omaha. And what I mean by that is, so I've got a client right now. He's from Utah. We're talking about what Park City investments are. I mean, you got to spend $200,000, $300,000 to get a decent property, and then you can't rent it out for the same numbers you can here. So the important thing is, what's your cash on cash return? So if your mortgage payment on these things, if you leverage yourself correctly, and your leverage payment is $600, but you're getting $1,000 or $1,100, you're cash flowing $500, and that's why a lot of people are ditching their properties on the East and West Coast and trying to buy in the Midwest and places like Omaha because they're getting good returns. So if you do it correctly, you should be able to cash flow anywhere from, at minimum, $200-$300, up to, I've seen people cash flow $700-$800 because of how they bought correctly, they renovated correctly, and they rented it out correctly.
And are you going to have to be your own landlord, or is there somebody you can hire to do this for you? And if so, what's something like that going to run?
So when you start talking about the property management aspect of things, me personally, I'm a fan of controlling what I can control. And that's the beauty of investing in real estate versus like a stock market. Now, I'm not going to be the guy to sit here and say, mutual funds and IRAs and stuff like that are bad. Absolutely not. I'm a firm believer in diversifying. Because of the knowledge I do have, probably 70% of my investments or 80% will be in real estate. But I definitely have a financial advisor that I work with to supplement other angles of that too. So getting back into the property management thing though, the reason I like to have my hands on is because I have control. So if you got 1 to 5 properties, you can manage them easily. Because here's what happens. You've got control on what you buy. So you're controlling what you pay. You're controlling because now you're having someone show up and you're meeting them. You're shaking their hand. You're seeing them face to face. You're asking the questions. And at that point, the place is rented. So if you've done your job correctly, you've got this place ready to go. So if it needs new paint, you're putting new paint in. If the furnace needs service, you're doing that. If it needs a new roof, you're doing that. And then you're renting it out. I'm not a slumlord. I do this correctly to where I provide a good quality product and service for tenants. And it's no different than going to a restaurant. When we go and we're going to pay $15-$20 for a burger, we want it to be a really good burger. We want the service to be good. We don't want to pay $15 or frankly, we don't want to pay $5 for a crappy burger, somewhere. So it's a lot easier than what people think. And I don't know when you want to talk about the pros and cons, or I should say the fears of investing in real estate. It's one of my favorite subjects to talk to with people, just because of the answers and the instincts that I get from people.
Awesome. What are some of the common fears you'd mentioned? I'd say probably 95% of the people tops that listen to investing in real estate knowledge, they're going to come up with some reason why they can't do it. Or what are some of the common fears that you hear a lot? And are there any objections that you can address head on and maybe
Sure.
get someone to take action?
Yeah. So, it's really funny. Like I said, this is probably one of my favorite questions to be asked because you always get the craziest, and a lot of times it's the females. It's like, well, I don't want to buy a rental property. Because what happens if the tenant trashes it? What happens if the furnace, breaks down? What happens? And they just start saying every what if. And it's kind of ironic because what I've noticed is that, it's one of the only subjects that's always approached with the negatives first for a lot of people. So case in point, did you and Amy just had a baby. Did you not have a baby or did you think about not having a baby because baby might get sick? Do you not take a vacation to Europe because, you might get lost or, you might get delayed on a flight? You can always talk yourself out of things. And I'm not going to lie, things do happen. I've had, furnaces break down. I've had water heaters go out. But let me ask you, Joel, if your furnace broke down and Amy called you and said the furnace broke down, what would you do?
Fix the furnace.
Well, would you do it personally or would you call somebody?
I'd call somebody, definitely.
Okay. it's no different than a rental property. If something happens, you call somebody. I mean, there are the people out there that are super handy. They can go and, manage their own stuff and fix everything. But for the most part, I give my tenants, the people that I work with great quality people. And I say, hey, just give me a heads up on what happened. And then, let's make a plan. If it was your fault, if it conflicts with the lease and you damage something, you're going to pay for it. If it's just natural wear and tear, I'm going to pay for it. And it's like that. I mean, do we not buy a car because we can get into a car accident? You just go down the list, and it's just always amazing because people think that these problems are just going to, amount to something that they can't control. And that's not the reality. Again, if you're doing it correctly.
What advice would you give to somebody that's looking to invest in their first property? Like, what's an action they can take today?
First things first, I think is always, depending if it's a single person, if it's a family, I mean, it all comes back to like, what is your family plan? I mean, a lot of the perks with, investing in real estate, I mean, you get tax benefits, you can get passive income. You can write off the depreciation. And this is what's crazy. You can write off depreciation, yet your property appreciates. So that's kind of like an amazing thing that you really can't do with many of the things. So what you really want to do is, I would say, just start soaking up knowledge. Talk with your family. How are we going to invest? What's our plan? And again, not to knock the stock market or anything like that, but when you put money into a stock market, what are you doing with it? I mean, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, here's some money, and we're praying. We're praying that the stock market goes up. With real estate, you've got so much more control on really everything with it, minus a few hiccups. But so soak in knowledge. Give me a call. I mean, there's a lot of great realtors out there, but I can say that not every realtor knows like how to do the ins and outs of the investing world. How do you buy it? How do you finance it? What type of leases do you do? How do you go about, do we do a parking money strategy, which is like where you buy a nicer property, you don't get the greatest returns, but you get tax benefits and your values will appreciate? Or do you do what a lot of people know is the BRRRR method? If you've listened to Bigger Pockets, you buy it, you rehab it, you rent it out, you refinance it. And that's a strategy that I like to do because you can build instant equity. But it starts with taking the leap of asking a question. Frankly, if all of your listeners said, awesome, and they called me up and said, hey, there's 50 people that want to buy an investment property, I mean, I'd kind of freak out because that is 50 new people I have to educate, and it takes a lot of time to educate people. And there's the properties supply and inventory right now is very low. So it can be tough I'm not just trying to sell this on people. Some people it's for, some people it's not, but I think it's for a lot more people than what people think it is, if that makes sense.
You've mentioned the Deeper Pockets podcast, and I know there's also a Deeper Pockets website. Is there any other places online or books, or where else can people find out more about investing in real estate?
So quick correction, it's Bigger Pockets.
Bigger Pockets.
Yep, Bigger Pockets. Well, yeah, first and foremost, I mean, anything you can read. I mean, there's a ton of great books out there. I know Bigger Pockets, they put out a few of them. If you go onto Amazon and you type in real estate investing, you can find 100 books. What you have to be careful of is, applying that knowledge to each individual area. And just so the crowd knows here, there might be different opinions on how to invest in real estate. There's plenty of different opinions. There's plenty of ways for success. I just know what's worked for me. I know what's working for my clients. I know what's making sense to them. But there's plenty of books out there that they can read. And then at that point, it's like, okay, well, now I've got some interest. Now let's take the further step. And that's where talking to a person, helps out. So no different than in your business, people can go online all day long and they can read about personal training. They can read about different diet fads. But, I know that from working with you, one of the reasons why I wanted to start working out with you is because it's like, okay, I want someone to bring that full wisdom. I want someone to connect the dots and put everything together, not just, kind of, oh, there's this article, that article. There's so much to be said about, working with qualified people. I think we've become an industry where we rely on the internet for everything. I know, Zillow is one of my biggest competitors. And so my job is to be better than Zillow, yeah, I guess that's kind of a stopping point on that subject.
Definitely. Well, you're definitely better than Zillow, in my opinion. And last question: how can people listening, both inside the city of Omaha and outside, support your business?
Sure. Again, I'm, for the sake of being redundant, my name's Rusty Johnson. It's kind of a funny name, so hopefully it's memorable. You can look it up, look me up on Zillow. If you just type in Rusty Johnson Omaha, you can find me on the Berkshire Hathaway website. You can find me on Zillow. I've got over 100 reviews, and I just like people to reach out and let's have that initial conversation. I'm all about delivering value to people. I'll talk you out of the wrong decisions, and I might nudge you for the right ones if it's a little bit uncomfortable. Just simply meaning sometimes we need that little extra boost of confidence. I'll never make anyone do anything uncomfortable, but yeah, reach out, send me an email. Hopefully you can put a link on there. I definitely will help, but I always like to learn too. So there's probably someone listening out there that knows way more than I do and has more properties than me, and that's totally fine. We'd love to pick their brain and see how we can help each other.
Yeah, and I'll definitely vouch for Rusty. I did hire him because he looked like somebody that wasn't an old fart wearing a suit that was 3 times too big for him. He was around my age, knew probably the kind of style of home we wanted. He found me and Amy our first home. I've referred him to countless people since, and he's just he's been more than our real estate agent. He's become a friend and a part of our lives. So I can't recommend him enough. Rusty, thanks again for being on the podcast.
Appreciate it, Joel. Thanks. All the best to the family.
Thank you. Guys, if you're listening, don't forget to go on iTunes and give Dads Who Lift a 5-star rating. If you say something nice about us, every week we'll be giving out one of these Dads Who Lift hats. They're not on the website. You can only get them through the review process. I want to thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next week.